Ellie woke before the stars relinquished their hold on the West Virginia sky. Her body jolting upright as if tugged by an invisible thread of duty woven into her very bones. No alarm clock blared, no knock echoed through the thin walls of the shack she called home, just the quiet, relentless call of hardship that had long ago become her morning hymn. The air was heavy with the damp chill of pre-dawn, and the shack, a patchwork of warped boards and rusted tin, seemed to crouch under the weight of its own decay. Ellie, only 10 years old, wrapped a frayed sweater around her thin shoulders, its wool pilled and threadbare from years of wear. Her bare feet met the splintered wooden floor, cold as the indifference that surrounded her, and she shuffled to the corner where a broom, its bristles half gone like a soldier missing limbs, leaned against the wall like an old friend who'd seen too much. Outside, the world was still cloaked in shadow, the kind of quiet that didn't whisper peace but screamed of absence. Ellie swept the dirt yard, her small hands gripping the broom as dust curled into the chilly air like ghosts of yesterday's pain, swirling and settling only to be stirred again. The yard, bordered by sagging fences and overgrown weeds, was her first task of the day, a ritual as ingrained as breathing. By the time the sun began to stretch its pale fingers over the rolling hills, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Ellie had already hauled water from the creek a quarter-mile away, her arms aching under the weight of the sloshing bucket. She stacked firewood by the porch, each log placed with care to avoid Darlene's wrath, her stepmother's temper as predictable as the morning mist. Inside, the shack smelled of grease and resentment. Darlene stood over a skillet, her face as sharp as the hiss of bacon fat popping on the stove. Her eyes, narrow and unforgiving, flicked toward Ellie. "Who made this slop?" she barked, sniffing the scrambled eggs Ellie had painstakingly prepared before dawn. Ellie stood by the door, hands clasped, her patched dress hanging loosely on her frame. "Me, ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the stove. Darlene snorted, her lips curling in disgust. "This mess tastes like it came out of a dumpster. You trying to poison us, girl? You think I don't know your trouble, just like your no-good mama." Before Ellie could flinch, Darlene dumped the skillet's contents into the rusted sink, the eggs splattering like broken promises against the chipped enamel. "Go kneel in the yard till I say otherwise. If I hear a peep, I'll tan your hide, till you can't sit for a week." Ellie obeyed, her knees pressing into the cold, hard dirt, the morning dew soaking through her dress. Darlene's daughter, Kaylee, sauntered out, twirling her phone, her sneakers crunching the gravel. "Still alive, huh?" she sneered, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "Guess even the devil don't want you." She tossed an empty soda can at Ellie's chest, laughing as it bounced off and rolled into the dirt. Ellie picked it up without a word, her face a mask of practiced indifference, her stomach growling like a distant storm. She was used to this, the taunts, the hunger, the weight of being unwanted in a home that never felt like hers. That night, in the cramped corner of the shed she called a room, Ellie sat on a thin pallet, the air thick with the scent of mildew and old wood. She pulled out her only treasure, a faded Polaroid, its edges curling like the petals of a dying flower. In it, a woman with warm eyes smiled, her arm around a man, a little girl with curly hair and a dimple nestled between them. Her mother's face, the only one that had ever looked at her with love, seemed to glow in the dim light. "Mama," Ellie whispered, clutching the photo to her chest, "why'd you leave me here? Why didn't you take me with you?" Her voice cracked, and she curled into herself, the ache in her heart heavier than the day's labor. The next morning, Ellie's body protested as she hauled water from the creek, her head spinning like a leaf caught in a current, her legs wobbling under the weight of the bucket. The path was uneven, lined with rocks and roots that seemed to conspire against her, but she pressed on, driven by the fear of Darlene's rage. She made it back to the shack, her breath shallow, only to be met with Darlene's venom. "You dragging like you're hauling a coffin." Darlene snapped, her hands on her hips, her voice slicing through the morning air. "You're a curse on this house, Ellie. A walking calamity. Ellie's lips parted, her voice a faint thread. I'm sorry, ma'am. Darlene's eyes glinted with a cruel satisfaction. Sorry. You ain't even my kin. You ain't nobody's. Your mama wasn't your real mama. They found you by the creek, abandoned like trash. Roy only took you in 'cause she begged him, crying about God's will. Now she's gone and you're still here, eating our food, breathing our air. Ellie's knees buckled, the words cutting deeper than any belt or switch. Found, by the creek, she stammered, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. Darlene smirked, savoring the moment. Yeah, like a stray dog nobody wanted. Be grateful we kept you this long. The world tilted, and Ellie gripped the doorframe to keep from falling, the words swirling in her mind like a swarm of angry bees. Found, abandoned, not your child. That night, she gathered her courage and approached her father, Roy, as he sat on the porch, a beer can sweating in his hand, the glow of a cigarette casting shadows on his weathered face. Daddy, she said, her voice shaking. Is it true? Was Mama not my real Mama? Roy didn't look up, his eyes fixed on the horizon. It's true. Found you crying by the creek, wrapped in a blanket. I told her to leave you, but she wouldn't listen. Said you were a gift. Now she's dead, and you're still here. His voice was flat, colder than the night air, each word a stone piling onto Ellie's heart. She stood frozen, then turned and stumbled back to the shed, her chest hollow, her world reduced to a single truth. She belonged to no one. Days later, Ellie trudged back from the market, a plastic bag of wilted greens, onions, and a bruised tomato swinging from her arm. Her sneakers, soles worn thin, kicked up dust on the gravel path. As she neared the shack, a sleek black SUV caught her eye, its polished surface gleaming against the backdrop of rusted trailers and broken fences. Two strangers stood beside it. A tall woman in a tailored coat and sunglasses, her lips a thin line of impatience, and a man in a crisp suit, checking his watch as if time itself owed him an apology. Ellie, Roy called, his voice sharp as a blade. Pack your things. You're going with them. They paid good money. You don't live here no more. Ellie's heart lurched, her breath catching in her throat. Please, Daddy, don't send me away, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I'll do better, I swear. I'll work harder. Roy looked away, his jaw tight, and Darlene grinned like she'd just won a jackpot. Move it, girl, the woman snapped, her voice clipped and cold. We paid for your services. No drama. Kaylee leaned against the porch, twirling her hair and laughing. Bye, trash girl. Don't come crawling back. Ellie's hands shook as she gathered her meager belongings. The Polaroid, 2 faded shirts, a pair of jeans, and a worn scarf, all stuffed into a tattered backpack. The SUV door slammed shut, the engine roared, and the girl they called a curse was driven away, the shack fading into the distance like a bad dream she couldn't wake from. The drive was a blur of unfamiliar sights, the SUV's air conditioning chilling Ellie's skin. Her backpack clutched tightly to her chest like a shield. Outside, the world transformed from rural shacks to the gleaming chaos of Atlanta. Skyscrapers towered like giants, their glass facades reflecting the sun like mirrors. Traffic lights flashed red, yellow, green like fireflies dancing in rhythm. Billboards screamed promises of fast food, luxury cars, and smiling families, none of which Ellie had ever known. Her eyes widened, not with joy, but with awe at a world she'd only glimpsed in the static flicker of the shack's old TV. She felt small, out of place, like a pebble tossed into a rushing river. The SUV pulled into a gated community, where houses stood like palaces, their lawns manicured to perfection, fountains sparkling like liquid diamonds. They stopped at a mansion that seemed to belong in a magazine, its white columns and arched windows exuding wealth. Inside, the air smelled of polish and privilege, with marble floors that gleamed under chandeliers that hung like frozen stars. The woman, Margaret, turned to Ellie, her sunglasses perched on her nose. You're here to care for my husband's mother. She's ill. You'll bathe her, feed her, clean her room. No complaints, no questions. If you misbehave, I'll make you regret it. If anything goes missing, you'll sleep in the garage with the rats. Understood? Ellie nodded, her throat tight with fear. Yes, ma'am. A maid, her uniform crisp but her eyes tired, led Ellie through a maze of hallways to a small room behind the kitchen. It held a narrow cot, a cracked mirror, and a single window that let in a sliver of light. To Ellie, it was a palace compared to the shed, with its dirt floor and leaking roof. She set her mother's photo by the window, its edges curling against the sill. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here now. Big house, big trouble, but I'll survive. I promise." At 4 a.m., Ellie woke, her body wired for work, the habit of survival stronger than sleep. She tiptoed through the silent mansion, her sneakers soft against the polished floors, and found the room of the sick grandmother, Evelyn. The air was heavy, stale with the scent of neglect and medicine, the curtains drawn tight like a shroud. Evelyn lay on a large bed, her frame frail, her face sunken into a pillow, surrounded by pill bottles, crumpled tissues, and a tray of untouched food. Ellie opened the curtains, letting sunlight spill into the room like a promise, and knelt by the bed. "Good morning, Grandma," she whispered, her voice warm, her smile genuine. "You're beautiful. Don't you worry, I'll take care of you." She fetched a basin of warm water, a soft cloth, and began cleaning Evelyn gently, her hands steady despite the ache in her arms. She hummed a lullaby her mother used to sing, a soft melody about fireflies and summer nights, its notes weaving through the heavy air. "We'll make this place smell like flowers today," she said, wiping Evelyn's hands with care, as if handling porcelain. "No more gloom, just you wait." Evelyn's eyes flickered, then opened, meeting Ellie's with a faint spark, like a candle catching flame in a dark room. Ellie chatted as she worked, her voice a lifeline in the silence. She told stories of climbing apple trees in the holler, dodging bullies who threw rocks, mimicking Darlene's drawl. "Ellie, scrub my dishes, for I count to 3, or I'll make you wish you were never born." Evelyn's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile breaking through her weary expression. Each morning, Ellie returned, bringing warmth to the forgotten room. She fed Evelyn oatmeal, spooning it carefully, gave her medicine with precision, and danced a little as she mopped the floor, making silly faces to coax a reaction. One day, Evelyn rasped, her voice rough but alive. "You got spunk, girl. More than I had at your age." Ellie froze, then grinned, her eyes lighting up. "Grandma, you talked. You're a firecracker, ain't you?" Evelyn's eyes crinkled, a spark of her old fire returning. "Was more than that. I was a storm, tearing through boardrooms, building empires." Ellie clapped, laughing. "Teach me to be a storm, Grandma. I want to make the world shake." Evelyn's smile deepened, and for the first time in years, the room felt alive, as if hope had slipped in through the open window. Weeks passed, and Evelyn grew stronger, sitting up, laughing at Ellie's stories of outsmarting Kaylee's pranks or sneaking extra cornbread from the shack's kitchen. Margaret, however, grew colder, her eyes narrowing whenever she heard laughter from Evelyn's room. One day she summoned Ellie, her voice sharp as a switch. "Go clean out the upstairs room, Thomas's old room, my husband's brother. I don't want to see anything that reminds me of the past." Ellie nodded, her heart heavy, and climbed the grand staircase to a room that smelled of dust and forgotten memories. The curtains were drawn, the furniture covered in sheets, the air thick with silence. As she sorted through old toys, baby clothes, and a pair of tiny sneakers, her hand brushed a photo album, its leather cover cracked but intact. Her hands shook as she opened it, dust motes dancing in the sunlight. On the first page was a picture of a little girl with curly hair, a dimple, and brown eyes, identical to Ellie. Her breath caught, her heart pounding like a drum. She pulled out her own Polaroid, the one from the shack, and placed the photos side by side. Same curly hair, same dimple, same warm brown eyes. The world seemed to pause, the air growing heavy with questions. That night, after her usual routine of sneaking to Evelyn's room with a bowl of soup, Ellie sat by the bed, her voice trembling. "Grandma, I found something. Is this me?" She laid the photos on the blanket, her hands shaking. Evelyn's eyes widened, her fingers trembling as she touched the images, one then the other. "No twins," she whispered, tears welling. "I held her. My granddaughter." Her voice grew firm. "Get the phone, Ellie. Call Sam, my assistant. Tell him to bring the doctor. We need a DNA test now." 3 days later, Sam, a soft-spoken man with graying hair, and a doctor in a black shirt arrived at the mansion's back gate, moving silently to avoid Margaret's notice. Inside Evelyn's room, the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. The doctor opened his briefcase, pulling out swabs, gloves, and sealed tubes. "This won't take long," he said, his voice calm but professional. Evelyn smiled faintly at Ellie. "Don't be afraid, my baby. Open your mouth." Ellie obeyed, her heart racing as the doctor took her sample, then Evelyn's. Sam watched, his eyes kind but serious. "We'll have answers soon, madam," he said, bowing slightly. They left as quietly as they'd come, leaving the room heavy with anticipation. 3 days later, the phone rang as Ellie was reading newspaper headlines to Evelyn, stumbling over words like inflation and economy. Evelyn snatched the phone, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Are you sure?" she asked. A pause, then a whisper. 99.9%? She turned to Ellie, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "You're her. My granddaughter. Thomas's daughter." Ellie's breath hitched, her mind reeling. Evelyn tossed off her blanket, her legs shaky but defiant, and stood, her eyes blazing. "Enough acting weak," she said, her voice like thunder. "I've been playing frail to watch my enemies. Margaret, Richard, they're scheming vultures. Now we fight." She grabbed the phone again, dialing her lawyer. "Get the board ready. We're taking back what's ours." The next day, Evelyn stormed into the family's Atlanta-based tech company, her presence commanding despite her months of feigned frailty. Ellie walked beside her, dressed in a new outfit from a boutique Evelyn had insisted on visiting, a crisp blouse, tailored pants, and shoes that didn't pinch her toes. The boardroom fell silent as Evelyn, once thought broken, took the head seat, her eyes sweeping the room like a queen reclaiming her throne. Margaret and Richard, Evelyn's surviving son, sat frozen, their faces pale as milk. "You thought I was done," Evelyn said, her voice cutting like a blade. "You locked me away, starved me, stole my son Thomas's company after he died in that crash with his wife and daughter. Or so you thought." She turned to Ellie, her hand steady on the girl's shoulder. "This is Ellie, Thomas's daughter, my granddaughter, the rightful heir." Gasps echoed, papers rustling as executives exchanged stunned glances. Richard stammered. "Mama, wait, we can explain." Evelyn silenced him with a raised hand. "You bribed board members, forged signatures, and betrayed your own blood. This ends now." She fired disloyal staff, reinstated her authority, and named Ellie as the future CEO, her voice unwavering. Margaret's face twisted, but she said nothing as security escorted her and Richard out, their bags dumped by the gate like discarded dreams. That night, Ellie sat in her new bedroom, a plush space with a white bed, a chandelier that sparkled like stars, and shelves lined with books she couldn't wait to read. Her mother's photo, now in a silver frame, sat on the bedside table, its smile a quiet anchor. Evelyn walked in, her royal blue dress catching the light. "You've been quiet, Ellie," she said, sitting beside her. Ellie sniffed, tears brimming. "Is this really my life now, Grandma? I keep thinking I'll wake up in the holler, still called a curse." Evelyn hugged her tightly. "You're no curse. You're my heir, my fire, my legacy." The next morning, Evelyn's convoy rolled into the West Virginia holler, tires crunching on gravel. Children stared, market vendors froze, and chickens scattered as Evelyn stepped out, her blazer sharp, her presence undeniable. Ellie, in clean clothes and new shoes, walked beside her, her head high. Darlene and Roy emerged from the shack, their faces pale. "You called my granddaughter a curse," Evelyn roared, tossing a stack of cash at their feet. "This is the last you'll see of her. She's no stray, she's royalty." Turning to Ellie, she smiled. "Let's go home." Back in Atlanta, Ellie's rise was meteoric. Enrolled in a top academy, tutored in business, finance, and public speaking, she shed her old fears, walking with the confidence of a queen. At board meetings, Evelyn introduced her as "my granddaughter, the future CEO," and applause followed. Margaret and Richard, exiled to a rented bungalow, faded into obscurity, their former allies turning away. One afternoon, Ellie stood on the company's balcony, overlooking Atlanta's skyline, her hair dancing in the breeze. From a shack to a skyscraper, from ashes to air, her heart whispered, "Welcome home, Ellie. You made it."